Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our ninth live webinar on cardiovascular pathology. Today's session is an incredibly special one. We are going to be talking about aortoarthritis and also remembering the life and work of Dr. Suman Kinare, who founded and established the subspecialty of cardiovascular pathology in India. Our speaker today is Dr. Jaya Deshpande. Madam was a former professor of pathology at St. G.S. Medical College and also head of the Department of Pathology at Nair Medical College. Her talk will be preceded by a case presentation by Dr. Pradeep Vedishwar. And finally, I will be talking about my own experiences with pediatric Takayasu disease. We will also be inviting senior members to discuss and share their memories of Dr. Kinare with all of us. And we will then also be talking about aortoarthritis. We would like to remind the audience that they can share their questions about aortoarthritis with us through our Facebook page, Cardiovascular Pathology. Madam, I would like to invite you to begin your talk.
Dr. Pradeep is starting, right?
So I would like to invite you to begin.
Yeah. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let us begin this session with a case presentation. This was a 42 years male who had only a 3-day history of complaints of chest pain and shortness of breath. There was no significant past history. These are few images which in the X-ray, which shows that there is a cardiomegaly, and also we can see a bulge which is produced by the aorta. And on CT, we can see that there is a fusiform aneurysm of the ascending aorta. In addition, there is also mild fusiform dilatation of the thoraco-abdominal aorta. What is striking to see is complete obliteration of the lumen of the left subclavian artery. This person was taken up for cardiac surgery, and finally a Bentall's procedure was performed. See the dilated ascending aorta. There is dilatation of the aortic root with features of aortic regurgitation. And finally, the ascending aorta has been replaced by this prosthetic graft. We received segments of the ascending aorta. This is the intimal aspect, which shows thickening and a distinct cobblestoning of the intima. Please also note that there is extreme thickening of the aortic wall, and a serial cross sections shows you thickening of the entire wall of the ascending aorta. We took sections from this region, and it shows extreme thickening of the intima. There is destruction, attenuation, and thinning of the media, and the adventitia is as thick as the intimal layer. The intimal thickening was produced by this loose edematous fibrocellular proliferation. These are images of the media which shows extreme thinning and infiltration by similar fibrocellular basophilic edematous tissue. Here, apart from this infiltration by this edematous fibrocellular thickening, we can also see in this image that there are hardly any smooth muscle elements. So the entire media shows what is called as a laminar necrosis, where there is loss of the nuclei of the smooth muscle cells. Along with the edematous alterations, we also have presence of large number of inflammatory cells, which has ultimately destroyed this particular region of the media. And the inflammatory cells mainly are macrophages and lymphocytes. And in some areas, we also see loose collections of epithelioid cells and the presence of Langhans to foreign body type of giant cells. Here is another granulomatous reaction which has virtually produced complete destruction of the media, almost like a palisaded arrangement of histiocytes, giant cells. And in this particular region, we can see a necrotizing inflammation. And if you look closely, we can see the we can see the elastic fibers which are ingested by these giant cells. So there is ingestion of the elastic fibers by these cells, that is elastophagia. In both these images, we can see that the intima is closely approximated by the adventitia. So in this region, there is total absence of the media. The adventitia, besides showing the presence of fibrosis and inflammatory cells, it also shows presence of end arteritis obliterans. So that is why here we are dealing with a large vessel vasculitis, that is aortitis. The changes are both acute and chronic, and in acute changes, it is not only lymphohistiocytic, but it is also necrotizing and granulomatous, and that is why the diagnosis in this case would be a Takayasu disease. Takayasu disease in this part of the world is called as non-specific aortoarthritis, and ideally it should have been called the Sen-Kinneret syndrome. With this, we go on to the presentation by Dr. Jaya Deshpande, who will talk about the giant of cardiac pathology, that is Dr. Suman Kinneret, and her experience in Takayasu disease. Over to Madam Deshpande, please.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Pradeep, for setting the ball rolling for today evening's program, which is dedicated to our great teacher, Dr. Suman Kinneret. Now, really speaking, we are all here today uh, because what keeps us together is our interest in cardiac pathology. And to this, we owe it to Dr. Suman Kinneret, who is the pioneer in cardiac and thoracic pathology in India. And she has led the way in establishing this as a specific subspecialty in pathology. Now, a few of us here, of course, have had the opportunity to work under her and learn from her. But many of the junior people amongst this group are probably not familiar with her career, her achievements, and her personality. And it is my attempt to familiarize them with our greatest of great teachers. So, Dr. Suman Kinare was, and this particular month of November, we will remember her because 23rd of November was her 90th birthday. She was born into an illustrious family steeped in nationalistic spirit. Those were the pre-independence era. Her father was a dentist, and she had her schooling and early college in Pune. She was a very bright student and a brilliant academic career in school and college in Pune. And she was given the Best Pass Student Award by her school. And she received this award from none other than the late Sri Rajendra Prasad, who was the first president of Free India. After her early schooling, she moved to Bombay to join the St. G.S. Medical College and pursue her career in medicine. She had an excellent academic career and even passed the MD examination in pathology. It was pathology and microbiology those days. She passed it in the first attempt, and that was really no mean achievement in those days because it was indeed very difficult to pass the postgraduate MD exam in the first attempt. She then subsequently went on to join the Department of Pathology, and then she got a Rockefeller Fellowship for training in cardiovascular and pulmonary pathology. So this took her to the USA, and she worked in centers at University of Illinois at Chicago, at Yale University, and she worked under stalwarts like Dr. Morris Lev, who was very well known in congenital cardiac pathology, Dr. Avril Lebo, who was an expert in pulmonary pathology, and she also met Dr. Richard Van Praag and Stella Van Praag, who were also very senior fellows training in congenital cardiac pathology, and they remained lifelong friends. Wherever she went, she was appreciated for her dedication to her work, to her diligence, and of course, her deep knowledge of the subject. So much so that she was even offered a staff position in US, but she chose to come back to her alma mater, that is, say, GS Medical College, and there she was mentored by late Dr. P.K. Sen, who was a cardiac surgeon. They established Dr. P.K. Sen was responsible for establishing the Cardiothoracic and Pulmonary Center as a uh, special area in the GS Medical College, and Dr. Kinare was put in charge of the cardiovascular pathology section, not only dealing with patient care but also undertaking some research. In this endeavor, she was supported by Dr. K.G. Nair, cardiac physician and a faculty member, and Dr. S.R. Kamath, a pulmonary physician and also a faculty member. So ultimately, these were the sections that were established in the cardiovascular center: a histopathology and a morbid anatomy lab, a chemical and a clinical pathology lab, and an immunology section. Dr. Kinare was a great proponent of autopsy. She must have performed and supervised thousands of autopsies. She was very well known for her clinico-pathological correlation. There was a wealth of specimens in the department, and she had collected and preserved them from 1957 onwards. They consisted of congenital and acquired heart disease specimens and also lesions of the lung. Each of these were beautifully described, catalogued, and the records were kept very meticulously. So this is just an example to show you how extensively and in a detailed fashion each and every case was recorded, including the clinical findings as well as the gross and histopathological features. These records were then bound into volumes and kept in the section so that anyone could refer them for any kind of information. She also created her own indexing system for indexing the cardiac lesions. At those times, there were no computers. We had barely heard of computers, but she prepared a format which could subsequently be computerized. She had a very in-depth knowledge of congenital heart diseases to the extent that sometimes she was called to the operation theater when the surgeons were faced with a problem and they were dealing with the complex congenital anomalies and did not understand what they were looking at. So she would often go to the OT and guide them and give her thoughts on the problem. Along with Dr. P.K. Sen, her mentor, and her colleagues in the cardiology and cardiac surgery department, they described a peculiar disease of the aorta, which they would see now and then. And this initially they called it as the Sen-Kinneret syndrome. A monogram on this was published in 1972, consisting of a study of 101 cases. Dr. P.K. Sen gave it the name of nonspecific aortoarteritis. Subsequently, in 1998, Dr. Kinneret and a radiologist, Dr. Malan Gandhi, and myself, we wrote up the pathology and radiological aspects of nonspecific aortoarteritis, which by then was also known as Takayasu's disease. So this was a series of 80 cases which were recorded and described in this volume. Other than aortoarteritis, she was also interested in looking at the conduction system, cardiovascular tuberculosis. Along with Dr. Hema Kulkarni, who was a cardiac physician, they studied the mitral valve anomalies or the mitral valve anatomy. With Dr. Taskar, who was in charge of the biochemistry, they analyzed the apolipoprotein patterns in the coronary artery disease patients. The immunology section was headed by Dr. Sita Naik, Dr. Padma Shastri, and Dr. Ishwari. At that time, Bombay had numerous textile mills, and many of the textile mill workers suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, and so on. So she, with Dr. S.R. Kamath, had a project on studying the lung lesions in all these cases of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease who were autopsied. And as part of this study, she prepared whole lung sections of emphysema cases. This is a beautifully mounted whole lung section mounted on a filter paper. These are known as Gough-Wentworth sections. You will not get to see them nowadays because today you have CT, HRCT, and other very sophisticated radiological methods. Those days, there was nothing beyond a plain X-ray chest. But this gives you a beautiful picture of the lung and shows you the centrilobular or panlobular pattern of the emphysema. If you notice very carefully, this is a 1976 specimen. Subsequently, of course, this is a very time-consuming, elaborate process. Subsequently, of course, this procedure was totally stopped. She was very fond of teaching, and from 1978, she also became the head of the pathology department. So, as an administrator, also, she was very effective in problem solving. Her cardiology classes were extremely popular, and today, many of the cardiac practicing cardiologists, cardiac surgeons, etc., will vouch for her training that they received by attending these cardiology classes. Innumerable students have benefited. These were really informal classes starting around 4 o'clock in the evening, and there was no time limit. They would go on till 5, 5:30, 6, 6:30, and she would then elaborate on whatever the postgraduate had presented and show them innumerable specimens of the lesion that they had discussed. And I must admit that I learned whatever I could of congenital heart disease by attending those classes. They were extremely informative and they were extremely beneficial in understanding congenital heart diseases. She was the first woman president of the Indian Association of Pathologists and Microbiologists and gave an oration on cardiovascular tuberculosis. As an administrator, she was strict, yes, but she was also helpful, and she saw to it that in the Department of Pathology, there was scope for developing other specialties like gastrointestinal, renal, pediatric, cytology, etc. She motivated other faculty members to take up each of these specialties. Along with Dr. Vijayalakshmi Ray, who was in charge of the blood bank, they established a national plasma fractionation center, one of its kind in the country. So this is a picture taken in 1988 when she retired from the department. And those of you may notice a familiar figure, Dr. Pradeep here. This is Dr. Amo Shivaraman, who is with us today. And this is myself. And this is, of course, Dr. Kinnari. In 1998, I had conducted a CME in cardiovascular pathology along with Dr. Amo Shivaraman and Dr. Pradeep. She came to inaugurate the program, and she was very happy to see that we were continuing the work she had established in the department. She was generally very simple, unassuming, warm-hearted. Other than pathology, she was deeply interested in literature, both Marathi and English. She played the sitar and loved to travel. She had an amazing grasp of national and international affairs. There used to be a Shakespeare club in the premises of St. G.S. Medical College. Faculty members of other departments used to get together on Saturday afternoon, I think once a month or so, and discuss the various works of Shakespeare. Sometimes they used to get a professor of literature or somebody else from outside to also take part in their discussion and lead the discussion. So I was associated with Dr. Kinnari for almost 20 years. For 10 years, I worked directly under her, and she definitely trained me. And if you ask me, what did I learn from her? It's very difficult to say in a few simple words. But all that I can say is that when you teach what you love and share what you know, you open eyes, minds, hearts, and souls to unexplored worlds. And that is what I gained from my teacher. I can only say a very, very big thank you to my great teacher, Dr. Suman Kinnare. I was indeed privileged to have her, to be working under her. She was an ocean of knowledge and affection, a perfect guru. We last met her in November of 2000 on the occasion of her 70th birthday. She had settled in Pune after her retirement. She was terminally ill, but she was happy to see us. And within 6 months, we had lost her. So, this is our humble tribute to our greatest of great teachers, Dr. Suman Kinnare, a pioneer in cardiac and thoracic pathology in India. With this brief introduction to Dr. Suman Kinnare, I will go on to present the data on aortoarteritis, which we wrote up in 1998 in the second monogram. So today it is non-specific aortoarteritis is known as Takayasu's arteritis. Primarily, Takayasu's arteritis is an inflammation of the aorta. It was described first in Japan in 1921 by an ophthalmologist and subsequently given the name of Takayasu's disease. It was reported from various parts of the world but under different names: aortic arch syndrome, pulseless disease, middle aortic arch disease, etc., depending upon the pattern of presentation. However, the basic fact remained that it was a disease not restricted to the aortic arch or the arch vessels. It could involve any part or whole of the aorta and sometimes even the pulmonary artery. In 1990, the American College of Rheumatology classified Takayasu's arteritis as a large vessel vasculitis. So what I'm going to present is the autopsy data consisting of 80 cases. All these cases were from St. J.S. Medical College and KEM Hospital, Mumbai. And this was over a period of 35 years. In those days, the autopsy rate was pretty high. 30% of deaths were autopsied. Unfortunately, now the rate has come down, and the incidence of Takayasu's arteritis at autopsy was about 0.15%. Needless to say, autopsy material, it was rare to find the disease just restricted to the aorta and its branches. We could always see very severe disease. Clinically, the patients presented either because they had arch vessel involvement or they had renal artery involvement, and these were the modes of presentation. Coming to the age distribution, Takayasu's arteritis or non-specific aortoarteritis is a disease of the young. And as you can see, quite a number of the cases were in the pediatric age group. Even in the adults, it was in the 19 to 30-year age group that one could see the maximum number of cases. The youngest patient was about 2.5 years old, and there was a definite female preponderance. Most of the cases presented with hypertension. So young hypertensives in the pediatric age group or young adults with hypertension, one necessarily would think of Takayasu's arteritis. Now in Japan also in 1975, 20% were below 20 years of age. However, in later years, the figure came down to 10%. So by and large, if you look at clinical series in Asia and Africa, it was younger patients, while in USA and Mexico, older patients were affected. But even older patients means young to middle-aged adults. Now coming to the pathology, We look at the distribution and types of lesion, what was the involvement of aorta and its branches, the external and intimate changes. What was most striking is the amount of adventitial and periadventitial fibrous thickening, and this was significantly much more than in any other inflammation, even atherosclerosis. The other most striking feature was the presence of enlarged lymph nodes in the periadventitial fibrous thickened connective tissue, as well as dilated lymphatics. The external diameter generally was normal or little reduced. If there was a stenotic lesion, there was dilatation proximal to the stenotic lesion. Overall, the aorta felt stiff and not pliable. We could describe the distribution of lesion into two subsets. One is when there is a localized or segmental involvement of the aorta, and the other is when there is a diffuse disease. In the diffuse disease, the disease generally did not extend beyond the inferior mesenteric artery. And there was always a sharp line of demarcation between the affected and the normal aorta. Sometimes you could even get multiple short segments with skip areas. Localized disease was more common in the children, and in adults, it was mainly seen in the abdominal aorta. Overall, diffuse disease was more common than localized disease. So these are some of the pictures of the aortoarteritis. These are very old specimens, and you can see this is the descending thoracic and proximal abdominal aorta. Note the marked periadventitial thickening. There is a little waist-like narrowing. Here is part of the abdominal aorta totally narrowed. Long segment abdominal aorta. You can see the celiac, superior mesenteric renal arteries, but then it stops short just above the inferior mesenteric artery. Here also you can see how clearly the disease stops short here, and you can see the normal aorta and the diseased aorta. This is an example where there is very extensive disease extending way down up to the iliac bifurcation. But what is striking is this adventitial thickening and fibrosis with enlarged lymph nodes. Another example of a diffuse disease showing the marked periadventitial fibrosis with some lymph nodes which are enlarged. This is the transverse section of one such specimen, just to show you how thick the wall of the aorta would become. Localized disease was, as I mentioned earlier, more common in children, and generally one would see it from the arch of aorta going down into the thoracic aorta. Here you see the arch versus the disease starting from here. Again, thoracic aorta with an abrupt stoppage of the lesion, normal aorta. There is a waist-like narrowing here, a stenotic lesion. This is a segment of the abdominal aorta of the renal segment, and you can see both the kidneys. There is marked intimal thickening of the aorta, again an abrupt stop here of the lesion, and a narrowing of the renal artery ostia also, as well as the lumen of the aorta. Arch disease, isolated arch vessel disease was not seen. Whenever the arch vessels were affected, the segment of the arch was also affected. So here you see, this is the arch of the aorta, marked thickening of the wall with a thrombus sitting on the intimal surface. This is the left subclavian artery, completely thickened, fibrosed with a very narrow slit-like lumen. This is the renal segment of the aorta, also showing intimal thickening with renal osteal stenosis, as also renal artery stenosis. We did find coronary artery disease and pulmonary artery disease in few cases. There was coronary ostial stenosis. This is a very old specimen, but here the proximal aorta, ascending aorta was affected, and there was coronary ostial stenosis. A coronary artery section showing diffuse inflammatory infiltrate, and this is a consequence of coronary arterial inflammation leading to an infarction of the left ventricular apex and subsequent aneurysm formation. An example of pulmonary artery showing intimal thickening with a large elevated whitish area here indicating the site of inflammation. There was no significant narrowing of the lumen. There is no involvement of intrapulmonary artery, at least in our study, though of course radiology, etc., have described intrapulmonary involvement. The intimal surface showed plaques which were gelatinous white in the acute stage and diffuse in established cases. Often mural thrombi would be present. In older patients, there would be secondary atheromatous changes, and the lumen sometimes would be ectatic, irregular, stenotic, or obstructive, and few cases we did see aneurysms. So these pictures you have already seen of the thrombus, the gelatinous plaque. This is one of the older specimens showing marked stenotic narrowing of the renal segment of the aorta with an occlusive thrombus here, marked periadventitial fibrosis with lymph nodes. Again, a stenotic lesion here. Just to compare, these are the intimal plaques of non-specific aortoarteritis giving a cobblestone appearance and atheromatous lesions. Sometimes it does become, in older patients, when there is added atherosclerosis, it does become difficult to distinguish between non-specific aortoarteritis and atherosclerosis. But if you look at the wall of the aorta, the fibrous thickening would definitely be an indicator of non-specific aortoarteritis. The other associated disease that one came across frequently was tuberculous inflammation, particularly tuberculous lymphadenitis, seen in around 34 cases. Sometimes only one group of lymph nodes would be involved. Most commonly would be mediastinal or the para-aortic group of lymph nodes. Occasionally, we did find massive enlarged matted lymph nodes, and in 10 cases, there was multiple organ involvement by tuberculosis. These are really gruesome pictures. This is actually the aortic lumen. This is the periadventitial fibrosis, fibrotic tissue with massively enlarged matted group of lymph nodes. This is a diagrammatic representation of where all we generally found the lymph nodes. Another example of the abdominal aorta, these are the kidneys, and here you can see aneurysmal pouches and the presence of enlarged matted group of lymph nodes. Aneurysms were seen in 7 cases. Sometimes there were multiple aneurysmal sac. This is a transverse section to show you the aneurysmal sac burrowing into the wall of the aorta. This is an aneurysmal dilatation of the renal segment of the aorta. Coming to the microscopic picture, you could see an acute phase or generally a chronic phase. In the acute phase, there could be diffuse inflammation or granulomatous inflammation. The inflammation classically was generally seen at the junction of the adventitia and the outer third of the media. There was a dense inflammatory exudate composed of lymphocytes, plasma cells, neutrophils, eosinophils, macrophages. The adventitia showed a lot of ground substance and proliferating capillaries. The granulomas could be either of the tuberculoid type. Sometimes there were granulomas with numerous foreign body giant cells, no epithelioid cells, and sometimes it had a resemblance to microabscesses. These are some microscopic picture. Here you can see the adventitia, the outer third of the media, the dense inflammatory infiltrate that you're seeing here, areas of necrosis, and many, many multinucleated giant cells. There is massive destruction of the elastic and smooth muscle fibers. A closer look to show you a giant cell which has engulfed a elastic fiber. Here again, we have been doing routinely elastic Van Giesen stains on the aortic sections, as well as we used to do it practically on all the heart and lung sections also. And here you can see the disrupted elastic fibers and the giant cells which has engulfed the elastic fibers. Here again you see disrupted elastic fibers in the media. In the chronic phase, the inflammation was mainly lymphocytic and perivascular, but you could see the consequences of the acute inflammation in the form of areas of scarring in the media with interrupted elastic fibers. So here you see the media showing large areas of scarring, neovascularization, perivascular, lymphocytic infiltrate with a few eosinophils, and areas of scarring like these. These are elastic fibers in the media which have been disrupted. This is the scar tissue that remains behind. Again, the media and the much of the media replaced by scar tissue, disrupted elastic fibers, indicating the extent of damage to the medial elastic and smooth muscle fibers. Now, coming to the natural history of the disease, it was extremely variable and the duration of symptoms ranged from 1 month to several years. And in some of the young patients did have constitutional symptoms, though non-specific, of fever, joint pains, raised ESR, etc. The clinical presentation, especially those with well-established lesions in the aorta, would depend upon which segment of the aorta was affected, whether it was the aortic arch, the renal, etc. There was no regression of lesion. Once there was inflammation, there was only scar remaining. There were cases where one thought there were repeated acute attacks. And prognosis is influenced by the complications, age of onset, and the clinical course. The clinical course again would depend upon whether the arch vessels were affected or the renal arteries were affected or any of the other major branches of the aorta were affected. Uncomplicated cases, even when there was pulmonary artery involvement, it would come in the category of uncomplicated cases. Complications would include retinopathy, secondary hypertension, aortic regurgitation, aortic or arterial aneurysms. Coming lastly to the etiology. What is the etiology of this disease? As of today, we have no answers. In those days, because of the presence of these large lymph nodes, many of them showing tuberculous inflammation, it was believed that this disease is probably related to tuberculosis, though one could never demonstrate tubercle bacilli in the necrotic foci. In fact, Dr. Kinnare and some of her colleagues did carry out animal experiments using rabbits into which they injected BCG, purified protein derivatives of tubercle bacilli, etc., trying to elicit some kind of aortoarthritis picture. but really speaking, they did not come up with any specific answers. The problem in India is that tuberculosis is so rampant even otherwise. So one does not really know whether the tuberculosis that we find with aortoarthritis is part of the general tuberculous infection that occurs in the population, or does it have anything to do with the arterial inflammation? As of today, it is still believed that this is an immune response against specific vascular microbiomes. Today, we talk of vascular microbiomes as organisms which may be pathogenic in the wall, existing in the aortic wall, and whether this is an immune reaction against that. Even today, workers have found specific immune response against the heat shock protein of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which also cross reacts with the uh, fibers in the aorta. So, is this again an immune response as a consequence of tuberculous inflammation? Another consistent association that has been found over the years, even from the days that the Japanese described this entity, is its association with HLA-B52. Asians do have a higher incidence of HLA-B52, which is also found in Takayasu's arteritis. So, is it because of this HLA association that they are prone to develop this specific kind of disease? Everything is still in a matter of speculation. Coming to the management, this is one of the old cases where a heroic attempt was made to bypass the diseased aorta. A large graft was placed, extending from the thoracic aorta all the way down to the iliac bifurcation. Nowadays, of course, there is more medical management available. Steroids are widely used. Conventional immunosuppressive drugs like methotrexate are used, and even tumor necrosis factor inhibitors are used. So this is all that I have to talk to you or show you the details of the 80 cases of aortoarthritis that we wrote up in that monogram. And thank you very much.
Thank you for that, madam. I just have a few slides which I would like to share before we open up the discussion. For those who do not know me, I'm Dr. Saranya Singarvel. And being one of the younger members of the group, I never had the privilege of knowing Kinare Madam. In the departmental photograph which Deshpande Madam had shown, which was taken in 1988, I was maybe 3 years old at the time. And my own journey in cardiovascular pathology, which began in 2015, was a full 15 years after Madam had passed away. I joined the department as a fellow under the guidance of Dr. Pradeep Vedishwar. And the topic that was assigned to me for my thesis was pediatric Takayasu disease. Now, I had never really thought about this entity before I began to study it. Pediatric vasculitis is extremely rare, and the Euler Printo Press classifies childhood vasculitis into small, medium, and large vessel types. And Takayasu disease is the only large vessel vasculitis which is included under this classification. This was the first case of Takayasu arthritis which I had ever seen in my life. And this was a case of diffuse involvement of the aorta. All the four segments, that is the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, the descending thoracic aorta, and the abdominal aorta were involved. And there was also involvement of all the arch vessels. So this case prompted Pradeep sir, I think, to assign this topic to me for my thesis. And we undertook a 25-year retrospective study of all the cases of pediatric Takayasu disease. We divided the aorta into four segments: ascending aorta, arch vessels, descending thoracic aorta, and abdominal aorta. We also studied the involvement of the pulmonary arteries and coronary arteries. And depending on the pattern of distribution of the lesions, we classify the cases into unifocal involvement, multifocal involvement, and diffuse involvement. We also looked at the histology and we classified the cases into active disease, chronic disease, or healed disease. And then we tried to correlate the vascular pathology with the clinical presentation. And we tried to see how many cases had been diagnosed, how many remained undiagnosed, and how many had been misdiagnosed. So we had 23 cases in 25 years, and that made this the largest single institute autopsy-based study of pediatric Takayasu disease in the world. Only 4 out of the 23 patients were diagnosed during life. The disease was found to be extremely early in its onset, with death occurring at school age or even earlier in 19 of the cases. Abdominal aortic involvement was most commonly seen, with renal ostial involvement seen in 17 out of the 23 patients. And the disease abruptly stopped at the level of the renal ostia, and infrarenal involvement was extremely uncommon. Coronary artery and pulmonary artery involvement was seen in a significant number of cases. Active disease was seen in only 2 cases, and the other cases had either chronic or healed lesions. There was a marked involvement of the left subclavian artery as compared to the other arch arteries. So I had the opportunity to present this study in the ESP IAP conference in Cologne, Germany in 2016. And a few years later, I also had the opportunity to present a case of Takayasu disease, which had only or predominantly coronary artery disease at the AECVP conference in Lausanne. And there I also had the opportunity to speak about Dr. Sen and Kinare and put Indian cardiovascular pathology or the history of Indian cardiovascular pathology on a global platform. I think that the seed which Madam had planted many years ago is now a tree which is strong and vibrant with very deep roots. And I think that wherever Ma'am is, I think she would be looking down upon us and she would be happy to know that her life's work is being continued. With that, I would like to invite our senior members to share their memories about Kinare Madam. Pandit Madam, can I invite you to begin?
Sure. Well, most of the things Dr. Deshpande has told, but what is important for me is that I have not directly worked under her in the same institute, but I was from a different institute, and our Monday meetings were very, very popular. And when my head of the department, Professor Dr. Devdar, told me that you get trained in cardiovascular pathology under Dr. Kinare, I was extremely happy because she was known to be a very excellent teacher, and I felt myself to be very, very lucky to get trained under her. I started my training in 1978, and although I was from a different institute, she never had any reservations as far as training me. She did not keep anything in the reservation. And Professor Devdar had told me that, Shobha, remember, whenever you go to her with any problem, the problems will be solved there and that time only. And that is what I experienced. Whenever I took my specimens or slides to her, she never said that, keep the slides, come later, never. Whatever slides or specimens I took with me, she immediately saw them and reported them and trained me so much in that. And I distinctly remember what Dr. Deshpande said. Because of her phenomenal collection of specimens, we could learn in detail about various types of congenital as well as acquired diseases. They were so beautifully stored, catalogued with all the descriptions. I remember myself, Dr. Deshpande, Dr. Amu, and Dr. Jyoti Manke. We used to take out each type of anomaly and literally break our heads to study those hearts, keeping madam's descriptions, the textbook descriptions, and try and see every feature of that particular congenital anomaly. And that's how we got trained in congenital heart disease. So the Monday meetings are extremely popular because the clinicians also were taking part in them, cardiologists and cardiac surgeons. We could also learn the clinical aspects of those various cardiac diseases, both congenital and acquired. And she trained us in such a way that She not only trained us, but she believed in us. She believed in us that whatever we will report, whatever we'll write the description, will always be correct. And I remember once a surgeon from my institute had told her that, look, Shobha has reported like this. Do you want to confirm what she has written or what she has reported? She said, no, if Shobha has reported, it has to be correct. Means that much trust she had, which really was very motivating, very encouraging, and generated confidence in us. So that is very important. As Dr. Deshpande said, she was really an ocean of knowledge and affection. She loved to talk. She loved to talk. Whenever you talk to her, go to her and talk to her, or even on phone, at least half an hour she will talk to you, or even 1 hour. She was really very extremely methodical, systematic, and we'll appreciate your efforts. If you follow her method of description, follow her method of reporting, she will immediately appreciate that you have done very well. She herself held a cardiovascular pathology workshop, first workshop in KM Hospital, I think in 1985, yeah, 85 or 88 sometime. And that motivated us that we should have such similar workshops and conferences later on. She had a very great vision, and not really just vision, which was very crystal clear. She knew exactly what she wanted. She was extremely highly respected by all her students, by her colleagues, and all the staff members of KM Hospital. And really, whatever I learned, I owe to her. And thank you, madam, very much for training me. I also take this opportunity to thank Mr. Manohar Kinare, her brother, to he has given us all the photographs and descriptions. I mean, whatever her past was there. Thank you, sir, for offering all those photographs and information about madam. Thank you, Saranya, for giving me opportunity to talk about madam. Thank you. Saranya, you have muted your phone.
I was just wondering if Ammu Madam would like to say a few words.
Dr. Shantish is there? Or if Manohar sir can also speak.
Yes, sir.
Saying no.
That is Kinere Madam's brother. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming, sir.
Hello.
Good
Hello,
evening,
madam.
sir.
Hello, madam.
Do you want to say anything? Your program was very nice.
We
बोला ना.
were happy to see the whole program, though the technical thing was not there, but we could understand at least how great was her work, though we were a bit of layman. I had the good fortune to be her younger brother and also, you know, receive the great affection from her. And I'm really glad that the students and her colleagues are still remembering her. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, Jaya madam. Jaya Deshpande.
I've already talked so much.
Hello. I would like to say a few words.
Yes, sir.
I joined MCH cardiac surgery in 1979 in Sion Hospital. I was there with Madam Pandit there, and we used to attend the Monday afternoon meetings with Dr. Kinare for all the years that I was training, and we enjoyed really seeing all the congenital specimens that she showed us. and we understood the abnormalities from her. All our colleagues, I remember Satyavan Sharma, Hema Kulkarni, Govindan Nair, Suresh Joshi, Khande Parkar, Tendulkar, and I, and so many others. We would be attending those Monday meetings. And I remember those meetings so much even today, that we learnt all congenital cardiac pathology from her. It was the best thing that happened to us. We thank Madam for that. And also we thank Madam for arranging the workshop, where we remember she had one of the workshops, we had Dr. Van Praag and Dr. Anderson, both of them discussing the specimens, and both have complete different ways of looking at things. One is segmental analysis and other is embryological way of looking at congenital heart defects. And we thoroughly enjoyed those workshops. So I remember her with great pleasure, and I thank her for her inputs. And we are what we are today are of course because of her training. Thank you very much.
She stressed so much on external examination of heart. I remember that he used to, even before starting the dissection, she would say that first look at it, imagine what it could be, and then start dissecting. Because congenital heart disease, you can't dissect like acquired heart disease. So that training she gave us so much. And I remember Dr. Chokar telling us that because of that training, some of these cardiologists and cardiac surgeons had scored a lot in foreign countries because of that external examination of heart itself.
The first thing that we were taught is, as soon as the chest is open and the pericardium is open, first look at the heart.
Exactly.
And confirm the findings, whether you are finding what you thought you would find, or is it any different, and then to go ahead. Even today I teach my students that first thing you have to see is external examination of the heart, and that's what we learned from Madam Kendre. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can I add, can I make one remark? I mean, that time, of course, we were very, very junior. So apart from respect, we were extremely scared of Kinnari Madam. And it was not that when she had to fire a person, she never used to raise her voice. She used to fire very, very softly, and that, scared us even more. So that part I thought, let me just... Anyway, thanks to Madam's training, I also got trained. It is really a wonderful person. Thank you very much, Madam.
Yes, she was one person who loved to talk. And I remember when I had gone abroad for about 3 months for training in cardiac pathology, and I came back. I wanted to tell her my experience, but she said, no, you come at 4 o'clock. I knew I was in trouble because I was there only in her section. So I went at 4 o'clock, and we went on talking till almost 6:37. And the room became dark. She didn't even feel that we needed to put on the lights. So, she was so interested in talking, finding out all the details. And so most of us would say, if you end up with Madam at 4:30, you can't get out before 5:30. She would just go on talking of various things about the department, outside the department, and so on. So that is one experience which I will never forget. Sitting in the darkness, we could barely see each other's face, but we would still continue talking. Yeah.
That was wonderful. Madam, now if we could have some scientific questions. Ma'am, the first thing which I wanted to ask you is that technique which you showed of the filter paper mount of the lung. Ma'am, what was it called? And how did you do it?
By the time I joined, they were barely doing those sections because they were known as Gog Wentworth sections. And the whole lung used to be fixed in a mixture of gelatin and ethylene glycol, etc. And then with a large sliding microtome, or what the books describe as a meat cutter's knife. You had to slice the whole lung. There was also a vacuum embedding machine in which, the gelatin and ethylene glycol, etc., could easily embed the lung tissue. And then the whole slice of lung used to be cut. And it used to be mounted on a filter paper. This technique was first, I think, Gog and Wentworth described it in 1949 or so. And subsequently, I think Whitman in 1950s or 1960s modified it further. And nowadays it is not done, but even today the technique is there. And I have even read pictures or seen reports where they have cut slices of the heart also by a similar process. So you could cut paper thin slices of the heart and have a look at the gross morphology.
I think that image which you showed was really remarkable, ma'am, because
Yes.
the immense of detail in that image, it was really something.
Yes.
Ma'am, also I wanted to ask you, how many, did you notice in your study of 80 cases, what was the proportion of aneurysmal lesions to stenotic lesions?
Stenotic lesions were more, aneurysms we found in about 7 or 8 cases. Stenotic lesions were definitely more common.
And ma'am, in your vast experience now, did you notice that, that there was some difference in the proportion of aneurysmal lesions earlier compared to later on? Because, there would have been a lot of anti-inflammatory drugs coming in over a period of years. And then, maybe that would modify it because, they'd always teach you that, the aneurysmal lesions occur along with the active lesions. And then, it's like it occurs earlier on in the disease. And as the disease heals or goes into a chronic phase or heals, it becomes a stenotic lesion. Was there any such observation?
I agree that later on we did not see so many aneurysms the way we showed in the picture. See, those were pretty old specimens
Yes,
and
ma'am.
pretty old pictures. Later on, whatever aneurysms we would be seeing is more like a diffuse dilatation of the
Mhm.
aorta, not a saccular
Yes, ma'am.
aneurysmal pouches that we used to see earlier.
Yes,
But
ma'am. Because even in the 25 years which I had reviewed, now, madam, it's like the aneurysmal lesions occurred earlier on, and then the stenotic lesions were in the later years. So then I thought that there was something. Are there any more questions? Are there any questions? I don't think that
How
there are any
about
questions. Sorry, I don't think there are
no?
any
How about
questions on the page right now.
hmm,
Sorry, sir.
uh, any experience from European countries of Takayasu? If Dr. Ivana can say something.
On general, here in Nordic countries, in Finland, we have more cases than in the rest of Europe.
Okay.
And I've just briefly talked with our cardiac surgeon who did some years at Mayo Clinics, and he told me that the most of cases they operated on were like their surnames were either Asian or from Nordic countries. So there is definitely some genetic backgrounds influence. But still it is quite rare disease.
I was actually speaking to a friend in cardiac radiology, and she actually told me that there is also involvement of the right subclavian. Now that's not generally an artery which is easy to dissect, so maybe that's the reason why we have not seen it in our autopsy series, but it's bilateral subclavian for some reason.
I think radiology has shown even involvement of neck vessels.
Madam.
yeah, neck vessels as well as intrapulmonary arteries also. Though we don't see it, we have not seen it microscopically, but radiologists have described intrapulmonary artery disease also.
In
Yes, ma'am.
fact, Dr. Patwardhan, I think a few years ago, had operated a case of a radial artery aneurysm in a setting of Takayasu's disease.
Right.
I think somewhere in 2001 or 2002, if I mistake
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
I
long
think
back,
some,
long back.
yeah, long back, yes.
We never expected that to be the cause.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, Takayu's I mean, it's all generally known as pulseless disease.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
you would
yes.
have a bounding pulse, I'm sure, with an aneurysmal dilatation.
But ma'am, now the thing is, it's like because most of the cases, at least in India, have abdominal aortic involvement rather than arch vessel involvement. It's quite possible that it may not present like that at all. So it's like it could be a wide variety of presentations, including just hypertension because of renal artery stenosis. I think that may be one of the reasons why these cases are missed, because the presentation is atypical.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but even with abdominal aorta stenotic lesions, the lower limb pulses may um,
right.
be weak. And generally,
Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry to say, but most clinicians don't bother to feel the lower limb pulsations at all. So you would be missing out on that part of the clinical symptoms.
Yeah, but if
Uh,
young hypertensives present to us, we are going to see all these things. We are going to see renal, we can see the adrenal problems, if any. And so we are going to check all the pulses and we are going to get the CT angio done if we find any abnormality, for sure.
Yeah, I
But when
guess
young
nowadays with our
hypertensives don't come
CT
to cardiac
angios,
surgery
it
anymore.
is easier to pick up these cases.
Ma'am Sudhir here. So, ma'am, in those cases, autopsy cases, what is the final cause of death? You could find out.
It would depend upon, generally, they come with complaints related to kidney disease
Okay.
or to their neck vessel disease. So the
Mhm.
kidneys would show a lot of scarring, ischemia, etc. So the final death would be related to renal failure or something like that. The
Okay.
underlying cause being renal artery stenosis.
Okay. But actually, the actual incidence of Takayasu disease is high than the autopsy cause. Cardiac radiology people, they do often see
Yeah.
very frequently this
Yes.
Takayasu arteritis. And even they don't do biopsy also. So they just uh, do stents, aortic stents and aortic graft they'll do and they'll treat it.
I think nowadays with these modern techniques of CT, angio, etc., they
Yes, ma'am.
are picked up much more easily. Remember, those were the days when
That's true, ma'am.
none of these were available. So
Yes, ma'am.
large number of cases used to be missed clinically.
Yes, ma'am.
No, but unfortunately, what has happened is many of them have got, sort of atypical presentation. Like, for example, the case which was presented, despite the appearance or involvement of the ascending aorta as well as the abdominal aorta, the patient only had a 3-day history. So
Oh,
when we look at the different, clinical criterion for diagnosis of Takayasu, what has happened to all that if a person comes with only a 3-day history of chest pain?
mm-hmm.
So sometimes and very often we get Takayasu even as incidental cases at autopsy. And we have seen few instances in which it has produced like a sudden cardiac death. So, I mean, what Dr. Sudhir is saying that yes, definitely it is diagnosed by the clinician, but there is a certain subset which is missed and the patient comes like this.
Sir, microscopically also, is it possible for us to differentiate? I have not seen, I don't have any experience in syphilitic aortitis. To differentiate syphilitic aortitis with the Takayasu aortitis?
Yeah, because with syphilitic aortitis, one thing it is usually seen above the age of 40 years. Like we had a series of cases in, and unfortunately in the Indian population, syphilitic aortitis we have seen in a younger age group,
Hmm.
but beyond the age of 40, whereas most of the Takayasu are less younger age group. And of course, you have the cobblestone or a tree bark appearance is seen in both. But
Yes.
very often we don't see that plasmacytic involvement, infiltration. And the other thing is that we don't get a granulomatous reaction with necrosis with syphilis. So we often can differentiate, or can differentiate between syphilitic as well as Takayasu.
Okay.
And one more thing, what we are seeing, at least nowadays, is that Takayasu, previously we used to say that it involves the abdominal aorta, but off late we are seeing Takayasu with involvement more of the thoracic portion of the aorta, like how it is reported in the Western literature.
Yes.
That also that we have noted so far.
There are incidences of isolated coronary involvement without involving the large vessels also.
Yes. No, the problem is that that may be true from the clinical point of view,
That's
but
true.
in case
Correct.
we get an autopsy of such a case, there is always 100% involvement of the aorta. Only thing, it may not be picked up on the imaging studies.
Correct, sir.
Like in the case which Dr. Sharanya presented, though there was a predominant involvement of the coronary, there was always involvement of the ascending aorta. And sometimes the small plaques, unless we take a section, we cannot rule out that aortitic process.
Oh, that's
Sir, is there any difference, the abrupt transitions which you see in Takayasu, is that also seen in syphilitic aortitis?
No, it is not seen.
Yes, so that is like very
Yes.
peculiar to Takayasu. It's like,
Yes.
it's like florid full-blown lesions and then it just stops.
Yes,
And then you
it's
have an
very, very
antibody.
abrupt, very abrupt. It's almost like how we get skip lesions in Crohn's. It is almost similar to that.
Madam, there's a question for you from Martin in Hungary, and he says, can you differentiate on an aortic histology slide without clinical information between Takayasu and giant cell arteritis?
Giant cell arteritis is usually what we know as temporal arteritis,
correct. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And there the clinical presentation would be totally different. The size of the vessel would be different also. And in Takayasu's aortitis, what we generally see is inflammation coming from the adventitia into the outer third of the media, and if it becomes more extensive, it will involve the whole of the media. But the distribution of the inflammation, the granulomas, etc., is much more in Takayasu's arteritis. Giant cell arteritis, you generally find scattered giant cells, never such florid inflammation, etc., as you see in Takayasu's arteritis.
Yes, ma'am.
I have seen few cases of Takayasu arteritis where the media characteristically shows the pannus like what we see in rheumatoid arthritis, the degenerated collagen surrounded by this. So I think along with the increased number of plasma cells, it favors more in favor of autoimmune kind of an etiology than the infectious. But I never I have seen around 20-25 cases, but I never came across the typical epithelioid cell granulomas in the media. Multinucleated, randomly distributed giant cells, they're there with variable proportion of lymphoplasmacytic infiltration. But the typical, what we say, the necrotizing tuberculous granuloma, I have not seen. So
I request your leave because I have to attend another webinar. Thank you for inviting me for this.
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you so
for
much.
joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? So I think maybe we could end the meeting here. Thank you for a wonderful talk, madam. We come back on the 12th of December, and Sudhir sir is going to be conducting a slide seminar on cardiovascular diseases. Thank you so much, everyone, and see you again on the 12th of December.
Thank you, Saranya.
Thank you.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you very much.